Free expression is absolute.
I'm watching a debate now between Dan Barker and Cardinal George Pell. My main interest in this debate, I'm gonna I think watch it on rerun a number of times. But finding out more about what happened to Anthony Flew is something I'm interested in, genuinely, because he's cited in one of my all-time favorite books, Atheism, the Case Against God by George Smith, for a short piece he wrote called The Presumption of Atheism. And so, in fact, out of all the atheist writers that whose careers I've ever taken an interest in, Anthony Flew is the only one who is said to have, religionists use the term recanted. You know, they like statements like, if you have no faith-based religious belief, you'll probably recant on your deathbed. Some of them even lie and say things like Charles Darwin did, and you know, they'll name certain prominent thinkers and say, oh, they all recanted on their deathbed. They all got old and were nearly dying and panicked and went, no, there's definitely a God. So yeah, I no longer have any paperback work of Anthony Flew's, but I'd like to obtain it again, obtain some of his books. There's talk about how when explanations advance, it's pretty much always a theistic viewpoint getting superseded and overturned by a non-theistic account, and never the other way around. It's never when is it that believers in God have said, oh well, you unbelievers thought that you know, that this part of the world worked this way. Now you know that, well, we were quietly, humbly saying amongst ourselves that maybe it works this way. And now that you have all this instrumentation and equipment, you know, as you can see, we knew what we were talking about. Now, it seems to me always to be, it seems to me always to be that, and it's because it's so easy to do it. It's so easy for a religionist to say, you go, why does this exist? Why does war exist? Oh, sometimes God gets angry and God's chosen people have to invade and destroy those who aren't among God's chosen people. Oh, Oh, why does this virus or disease exist? Oh, it's a punishment from. It means that this God is angry at you. You've displeased him. If you pray and give 10% of your money to our church here, God might forgive you, and you can heal. And then the person goes and, oh, but I gave my money. I prayed. I haven't healed. Oh, well, at least, you've prayed and God's forgiven you. So you may still have the illness, but, just at least be comfortable enough, take solace in knowing that our God has forgiven you. But you said that the sickness was a punishment. Maybe that it was, but you've prayed and you've asked for forgiveness, and we did now at the church, at our church, we all gathered around you, prayed for you, and now we, you know now we sense that God has forgiven you. So you should be happy that you're forgiven. In fact, don't be an ingrate and say just because I've still got this disease, um, and that's how it's always been. Um, if the planet, there's still now, I think the Flat Earth Society still exists. There are pages in the Bible which talk about the four corners of the earth. Now, I think it's more likely that people that wrote the scrolls that went into the Bible, since they were writing on papyrus manuscripts that were essentially rectangular in shape once rolled out, those rectangular papyrus manuscripts had four corners, and none of them had Captain Cook's ship or whatever. None of them had charted the shape of continents, much less the entire planet. So it's more likely that ideas about Earth being square or rectangular shaped came from outdated theologies of people writing scribes on rectangular papyrus manuscripts. But that's an inadequacy, I see it, of religious belief, is that you can use the idea of God in any discussion about anything, and God's always the cause of something and always the cure of something. It's like headaches and caffeine in the Merck's manual, where they talk about how caffeine is the cause and cure of headaches. And church is like the people who say, oh, what's wrong? Oh, I've got a headache. Oh, here, have some caffeine. Oh, maybe the headache is worse from the caffeine. Oh, here, just have some more caffeine. Oh, I've still got the headache. Oh, have you? Well, maybe you should have some more caffeine. No, oh, thanks. Oh, I've still got the headache. I'll try some. Would you like to try some caffeine? It's just that's what the church does, I think. I can now to this. It's very easy. I could tell you what you could pick anything, and I could come up with a bullshit reason of why, of an answer to any answer to any of your questions, by appealing to the existence of an omnimax God. But I want to read. I want to read some more of Anthony Fleur's early writings around the time that he wrote The Presumption of Atheism, and then I also would like to read what it is that convinced him to become a believer again, because it seems in his case he might have. Here's the idiot. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think Anthony Flu's conversion was influenced by um, the extreme odds and some argument about it being far too unlikely for the human race to exist because of certain calculations about odds for certain things to have happened. That's if I'd try and remember. I have to think back to when it was that I first heard that argument. Yeah, these really extreme. The fact of the matter is, not just imagine there were a planet-wide lottery, one lotto company and everyone was a member, and you had to be a member or you got fined, like with voting. Then you'd have the entire human race enrolled in a lottery, and you'd have all these statisticians talking about, well, it's so unlikely you will win. Now all the advice you could possibly have on the basis offered to you about how unlikely you are to ever win, on the basis of those calculations, and even if everyone on the whole planet were forced to be a part of this lottery, then it's therefore going to always be rare to a certain extent that a given citizen will win this lottery. But also, say it's fortnightly drawn or weekly drawn, someone is always going to win it as well, somewhere in the world. So, and then there's also the whole. I would like to read why Anthony Flew says he would, with his level of knowledge, get involved in theistic belief again, because I wouldn't think that just statistically improbable arguments about self-replicating molecules and things like that could be a proof of theism. I could accept things like, well, these phenomenal odds have convinced me to suspend judgment until more is known on this topic, that topic, and that topic, and that topic, and that topic. Yeah. Just by telling you they're Freemasons, they're already disclosing that if they take that religiosity seriously, then they're essentially lying to themselves about the phenomenology of existentialism, which is, the philosophy of what existence is comprised of, causalism. So they're more or less saying that they're willing to lie about what's going on in another person's life. Otherwise, their logic would steer them into the direction of rebuking the theology of the existence of the devil. Same thing applies to serious God believers too. They do the same thing. It wouldn't matter if your existential error was the existence of God, the existence of Lucifer, or the existence of the dude from Agro's. No, he's real. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So a health initiative, you're supposed to make a petition or request, which for me would have been done in writing. Otherwise, forced interventions against the Constitution. So, sort of thing you can become aware of when you absorb and comprehend the integrity that's sort of encrypted in art pieces like Doppelherr's. Religiously motivated, tyrannical, totalitarian minds can, once they have ascertained a certain professional role, use their professionalism as a vehicle to forcefully push a religious agenda while convincing everyone around them that what they're doing is a virtuous duty in terms of health. This actually was taught about this phenomenon in college. Two graduates of psychology at university didn't disclose their credentials and went to a mental health facility, and they were within days diagnosed with about 7 different illnesses just from their conversations. At the end they had to say, well, we're actually graduates from this university that have studied, and then all the stuff went, whoa. More or less illustrates that they'll frame issues to anyone that talks to them, potentially. It really is like the modern form of the theologian's war. That's not a battle I'm fighting. I'm against theologians. Theologians drive wedges into comprehension of reality. They seem to do it whether they know it or not. Some of them are polite people and comprehend mutual respect while thinking they need theology, or else their life has no meaning. But I think that the reversal in of which Manson spoke in the 90s about being your own God, that was, I think, really about recognizing that if you were accosted by a religious activist group and you tried to understand them, the process involved you surrendering a lot of your personal potential and power. And so in doing that, in that act of yield, disguised yielding, a God is created, and it's just a waste of energy expenditure. So you reclaim it. It doesn't mean you think that you're the one making the rules for everyone else, like the God character does in the narratives. It just means you acknowledge you invented him. He didn't exist external to your reality. You and your team in the church had to have invented him. That means your mind has the power to at least create a Bronze Age God. What else can it do? That's the question that you start asking when you exit the church. But yeah. I should have known the story would loop due to the religious people positioned in various healthcare roles, deluding themselves that they are compelled by professionalism and not prejudiced beliefs. By now, perhaps they comprehend these artists I've grown up with at the same viewpoint as I. We were never promoting any theological agenda. Belief in the devil is still a form of theology. Doesn't matter if it's more interesting than Christianity. There's a tremendous amount of material that's vastly more interesting than all the axioms in theology. Breaking it down and rebuking it. Realizing that if those who believe in it will be prone to making some of the most pathetic judgmental errors, you know, they think they've got a whole being with supernatural abilities actively within their brain, and they're in cahoots. and yet I apparently have a split personality. Or they've got the devil in their mind in secret. But they're genuinely and sincerely invested in psychiatric prowess, of course. It's not backed by religious discrimination at all. And if they didn't want you to see that, I suppose they'd blame it on the video. I take it that in their theology, in the narrative, the Lucifer sows seeds of chaos, similar to the way he does in books like Job in the Bible. Create some chaos so that the weak genes, the ones with the weak genes, simply perish. The ones with the strong genes manage to survive. Survival of the fittest. That's part of the Masonic agenda. Call an invasion a well-meaning intervention. Misconstrue what constitutes being signaled, contacted, or called. With an arrogance, theologically denying that quantum mechanics is quantum mechanics. That element of their multifacet. They can be a Freemason and then a pharmacist. Why is it up to me to satisfy answering their whatever's now? I mean, every day, every shift they work, they're confronted with why they should most likely want to deal in naturalistic philosophical terms. That's what the populace shows them every shift. It's too silly. I don't comprehend supernatural as professional. It's the beginning of excusing oneself for the usurpation of others' rights. I think in Ian's store, an examination aimed at trying to determine if a particular person is suitable for employment, conducted by management, should in fact be done in the context of reiterating constantly that within the franchise and even within one duty within a single store, there's certain things, there's a certain confidentiality. Now, the best way to model that confidentiality is to be not breached, is by showing the employee that management will always respect the residential privacy rights of the prospective employee. Otherwise, they're saying, that something hypocritical. They're saying, protect and safekeep the privacy of this business while we tell you how we're violating your privacy rights at any point in time. They do this, and then they're essentially saying, expose us. We double cross ourselves, expose us. And that's more or less what they drum into the conscience. It's just disturbing to see every time the crimes of the supernaturalists the way that they almost want to do the dance over and over until they're caught and made severely accountable. The woman that drowns her kids in the bathtub, just pleading to the courts that she was just obeying God. The time to call religionists on their bluff is always a time to enjoy. And that's one phenomenon I can never understand without having to actually genuinely speak the conclusion that Roger Toller's mind incorporates more or less the ethical disposition of a pred. This is what I want people's attention drawn to, is this concept of in addition to supernatural excuses, you've got the excuse of, but I'm just inquiring as a part of a research effort. How many? Where do you think the limit is, and in terms of what cannot be excused or written off in the name of research? Where is it? What's too far? And so there's the competitors in the private sector just seem to keep insisting that private sector means not amenable to, or not answering to the rights charter. It's slightly reminiscent of those stories of Hitler wanting to, capture Jews that had certain facial features and, kill them and study their skulls and things like that. Truly horrible crimes have been perpetrated, all because the instigator is saying there's something to research. I find it amazing, truly, truly amazing, that my request after 9 years of service, after being asked to leave and not come back by an employer who did not follow up with a formal document stating that employment had officially been terminated after I'd signed an employment agreement. Nonetheless, I agreed it was time for me to leave, but the owner just could not. It was just strange mentally. It disturbed me greatly, because it's essentially saying, well, you're choosing to leave and perhaps work on art or something more to your interests. I think that goes against my interests, he says, and then the reality then that this portrayed is, for 9 years of service, we want to put you on the Mental Health Act. It's like the guy that starts planning the bombs on buses on the movie Speed, using the timer from that crusty gold watch that he gets from his job. You start to feel a bit like that guy, Dennis Hopper, a villain. Because of how you've been mistreated, you cannot fathom a step forward unless you recreate yourself now as an opponent. In that sense, time has been of the essence, because it's allowed me to know thy enemy, know your enemy. It's Rage Against the Machine sang. Now, the reality is, the history of this continent is that white men came here to discover it was filled with art. Art was everywhere, on rocks, faces. The Aborigines' creative spirit is beautiful. It's very inspiring. But what isn't inspiring is this white, perhaps Christian-backed, theologically driven unilateral initiative to call the beginnings of this continent something to be proud of. In doing so, a lot of mistreatment is ignored, and that story, I see elements of it on a loop, as you know, some white people with who are artists, and so they'll be targeted. Basically, if any healthcare professional is even open to the possibility of profiting from the sale and dissemination of an idea of a conflict that is a fraud and not true, not provable, and a digression from owning up to, you know, wrongs during the line of duty, they're absconding. Blame it on the fucking TV. It's pathetic. I mean, if you're even open to the idea of that, I actually think it's a true violation of the degree of trust a citizen hypothetically thinks they should invest in healthcare oriented businesses in the first place. It's like they misheard the Hippocratic Oath and the words of Hippocrates, and they're worried about getting too many critics, so they invented the Hippocratic Oath. So what is the oath of Hippocrates? Very well then, people will soon gorge on the intel of Roger Toll's concealed in a dealer, more extreme than Cardinal George Pell. Very well, and people will soon gorge on the intel of Roger Toll's inner dealer, more delirious than Cardinal George Pell. Also, if a depressing note is the fact that as an employee in Capital, Roger doesn't make it clear to you what your rights consist of. Statements like, well, this is a private franchise. Well, you might stop and think, okay, well, so what are the rights that an employee therefore will enjoy? Or what rights do we have? So then if you leave, I suppose, see, maybe he doesn't even know. I'm beginning to wonder if that's the case, but it's his mind has those elements of you know, I have no idea why he would try and say to me, as he did in 2010, that I'm out to make my own rules. I mean, DJing, I understand it's not so conceptually engaging. It's more about, I found it sort of exorcistic because I could unwind while doing sets, and the vicarious enjoyment for those who would dance and enjoy or request tracks. But it's almost like he's reserved opinions for what rights to actually say a person has is for when he tries to shuffle them onto, the Mental Health Act. But I think a lot of these misunderstandings wouldn't occur if, upon original, when you first meet them, or when you're told you're now an employee, they should immediately talk rights right away. Talk about their regard as a business for the rights charter, and those sorts of conversations should happen from the outset. I think it gives some sense of at least conceptual social security for the worker, and it gives the employer a chance to actually fathom what their employees stand for. Faith is not adequate. Faith is it's like assume everything you want to. Assume anything you hear. Assume. That's faith. Belief or trust that does not question or ask for proof. You have to be very careful with that. That Christian woman who drowned her children in the bathtub because she heard the voice of God telling her, she acted in what she knew to be good faith. Have a think about that. I remember in the later part of 2009, while working at at O'Connor, and a girl, Akila, she is Indian, beautiful girl. It was great to work with her. And Roger Toll had come in and pointed at the Fess saline nasal sprays, and now that I've had all this time to think about his seeing is believing, hearing is believing things, it's interesting seeing. He points at it and goes, bit much to pay just for seawater, isn't it? But the price for that saline Fess spray is also pretty much the same as the base hourly retail award wage hourly rate. So the bottle of Fess was like equivalent to an hour's work in pay. Seeing is believing. So what was he doing? Fessing something about the base retail award wage, given the uber higher calling that is retail pharmacy, so high as to render the prefix word retail inappropriate, because it's
the desperation you hear from
so much more noble a cause. And then January 2010, Roger Toll definitely showed he was one, partial to invade my territory. He meant to, and he meant to usurp the doctor I was seeing. So he who meant to usurp the doc in my territory winds up in a documentary made by me. Actually, with Roger saying things throughout the career in the Capital franchise that I was gay, and his definition of that is, and he wasn't the only one to say it. A poof is just a person whose responsibility comes from the rebellion against their own sexuality. It did have a sort of ring to it of like them saying, "Go fuck yourself." And if that was their underlying sentiment, I wanted to understand what their particular case, in relation to me was and what their considerations were, because there is such thing as framing the issue. I don't respond. I'm not a perfect person, and I do not say, oh, you're lying and you're framing the issue to anyone over anything if I'm contested. I've got proof of that all through my writings. I scarcely even would invoke the straw man fallacy. You wait until someone has put words in your mouth more than once, I think, if you want to be polite, and then show them that they've invoked the straw man fallacy, because they're not even criticizing you. They've just got worked up over an idea of you that they had, an impression, and they've had it their impression, but none of your words actually support that impression, and hence that's what a straw man fallacy is. Build up the straw man and knock it down, but it's not even you. But since he knew that I was so into the works of people like Manson and Korn, in particular, like the first album, the self-titled Korn album, has a song on it called "Faggot." I did an assignment on it in an English class in college. We were asked to select a song, and it's a song actually about just being different, and on the grounds that you're different, you're getting called a faggot. But the whole song's about getting angry over that and rebuking the ad hominem. Why is it people who seem to be a little bit different suddenly get accosted with, sexually themed discriminatory statements during work hours? It's so interesting observing differences between people. A young girl at the counter, Amelia, one afternoon said that the thought of old people having sex was gross to her. And Peter Holder took serious offence to it. He would have some talks to me afterwards saying, "Oh, I do not like that Amelia. I think I might have to take her off the roster." But Amelia was shocked that Pete spoke back to her on that topic, like as if to say, "You've offended me." But whereas I think Peter should have just chilled and gone, "Well, look, what does he expect? Does he want Amelia to think that's what watching Peter root would be a good sign of respect to one's boss?" I don't know why Pete took such offence to it. I downloaded an episode of Howard Stern where they interview Granny Annie. She's an elderly porn star, and she does sex scenes with black men. She was talking to Howard Stern about the stereotypical African American penis being giant, and she's tremendously old. She's a granny, but she has her own little niche market in pornography where she does these Granny Annie banging. She might have even banged an animal. I can't remember. But everyone has. I was in my teens. I was what you call. See, I took the idea from. I love when Manson said in an interview that he's a serial monogamist. I have been cheated on, but to the point where I took it as a challenge personally. It was when I was much younger to transcend jealousy, and it worked out to be really well. It worked out really well. Worked out really well, and they became a little bit more libertine. But Manson's used the term serial monogamist. I'm a serial monogamist, and we were asked in church to not have sex till we were married, and I was. Sex actually wasn't even the topic that initiated my debates against the church, though I found their many ideas about sexuality to be quite, I thought, harsh. I've already mentioned that they excluded a gay keyboardist who was more talented than any other keyboardist or piano player in the whole church. you're allowed to play keyboard and piano if you stop being a homosexual. That's what they told him. But for me, it was just simply truth and like investigating the Bible. Their statement is that it's God's perfect word, so finding contradictions. They were the. That was it for me. Is that you're true to yourself, and that means you want to be thinking about truisms in philosophy. So if you counter errors, the eye for errors sort of brings you a bit of calm because and serenity in that those errors mean truth is lacking in the Bible, and that means that you then have to start dancing with arguments about does God even exist? But then it would mean if he doesn't, then he obviously hasn't caused all these wars and he's not ending all these lives, and there's release in that. There's some peace in that as well. Yeah, but that scene in Hughes, I'll never forget it. I mean, who was in the wrong? All I really did was state an opinion. I think old people having sex is gross, and Pete took it real personally. Like, how dare you? It wasn't that she was saying old people or older people can't and don't have sex. She was just, how can it be bullshit to state a preference? You know. I just watch the. Well, actually, if you're a manager named Roger, then you can often insist. Threats abound, abundant. That it's more than bullshit to state preference. Because he'll tell you your preference. Because he knows what matters, and he knows everybody needs their capital counted. What's therapeutic is not having loose ends. I did stake my name against the claim to have been persecuted for trying to be true to myself by certain mainly one particular youth pastor in the church I went to in my teens. But when I was working with Peter Holder at Hughes, he would talk to me about his dealings with Christians, and he sounded a bit quite emotional. Like he would say that they would pick on him, and I would think, well, if you memorize the issues over which they picked you, and just go online to a forum community where that same issue is being discussed, and then join in on the debate and debate your point of view. You can use a pseudonym, have anonymity. And it's actually a very therapeutic and beneficial process, because you're able to get off your chest what bothered you, and you're able to see how your opinion, meters out once it's subjected to the rigorous scrutiny of a community discussion. Yeah, he sort of had that. And they picked on me. Like in Wanyasa High School, we would say that's to call the wambulance. And the Christians picked on me. That's that's calling the wambulance. If you can stitch the cut finger yourself at home, then there may not be any need to call the wambulance. See, let's say that you do the opposite thing. Let's say they picked on you with various ad hominems, name calling, and partial arguments. and you took it personally. Well, then the opposite to that is on a forum. There's no need to take anything personally. If you have a pseudonym, a fake name, no one else on the forum knows you. And it's like it's a balancing act. You can pick up where you left off, and you can see if all that these people had to back their name calling and their sort of verbal encouragement was just uh, you know uh, irrational, childish, and irrelevant. Uh, Prejudice without having a valid point to make or anything like that. Is Puff the fuck with Pell talking about him. How important Roger Toll's work really is. Roger Toll's cause is superiorly important. It's very important. He has a special cause. So for me, urinating on the pharmacy technician folder is a small part of. I enjoy removing any sort of items or possessions that remind me of any of the shifts that I worked in the company over the 9 year. Well, yeah, pretty much. No, yeah, 9 year period. So there was a desk chair, I think, that Roger had given me at one point. I was getting rid of it as a second-hand item, and it was a functioning computer chair potentially. So I gave it to a neighbor up the street. And I think all the uniforms are thrown out. His old pathetic dance, Rogers, is well, we at least treated you from A to B. From A to B. Uh, you know, you start to get some of your drives for expressionism back, which you've always lived for and always celebrated and always tried to enjoy in the company of others and those who you choose to be to accept as valued company, valued company, and yeah, it's fascist nonetheless. He'll do that sooner before admitting outright to a list of fuck ups. Like I can see his mind working that way, and you might say, well, why, how, and why? And it's because I'm able to factor what has been said and done, and what hasn't been said and done from a particular mind, and then consider which possible direction that person would go in. And that's also part of how I caught this idiot online. Was I have at the very least caught him, I would say, irrefutably for not being opposed to certain wrongful acts in terms of how he thinks, So that's yeah, I wish it had played out where they'd went like, "Oh, you caught our shoplifter, thanks." uh, no, you better not work here. Surely you will. We don't want you to catch what our boss, the manager and the co-founders are involved with and what they're into. And if they had said that instead, I would have said, "Oh, cool, thanks," and then I would have gotten a job in somewhere else and not at Capital Campus. Um, the irony that it wound up being, yeah. Look up irony, of course. Right, and thanks. Um, Ideas of in within for those who are promoting and advancing agendas of supernaturalist believers. When they talk about what they believe in, and it always seems to involve like it's almost like they try to use nature as a hook to sell their product. Uh, so yeah, what they would find if they didn't resort to drawing on concepts that are natural concepts, uh, words that have purely naturalistic um, usages, uh, that no one would be able to understand them. Um, the words would be meaningless, so they have to always have um, like words of about nature, and then mix them with these supernatural concepts. So yeah, but they'll try to say that supernatural, the definition means beyond nature or not of nature, but it's hard to it's I think it's hard to say who is so learned in nature uh, that he or she could ever say where its boundaries have been infringed upon. That was, I think, a saying from a skeptic of miracle claims. In order to prove a miracle, you would have to prove in some way that nature's laws had been abrogated, and otherwise you would have a naturally occurring event that was not a miracle, but it's just something that happens in nature. Uh, that same. So yeah, the question was, who's so learned in nature that she or he can say where her domain ends. Uh, but the a '90s show from David Copperfield uh, would look to various people in various parts of the world. Um, it would look to them just like uh, a miracle, a miracle orchestrated or caused by whatever was the popular deity in their region of the world, wherever they lived. If it was David Copperfield doing magic tricks by a bunch of starving Korean people, they would think that Kim Jong Un had uh, sent David Copperfield there. Uh, Need a cup of tea.